The U.S.-Japan Council highly values regional leaders like Governor Koike, who advanced subnational diplomacy over the years. And we had, as a matter of fact, held economic summits in Hawaii and Texas, and we're a co-organizer of the Silicon Valley Japan platform, which deepens connections between business leaders in Silicon Valley and Japan. Starting over a decade ago, we've convened a governor's circle of Japanese prefectural governors to elevate the voices of subnational leaders. And in 2019, we convened a California Governor Symposium featuring these governors, which was held in Northern California. So we're very pleased to present a very special panel discussion among two leaders with a deep appreciation of our mission, Hawaii's Governor David Ige and Houston's Mayor Sylvester Turner, who traveled all the way from the United States. Yes. Facilitating the conversation is Dr. Sheila Smith, the John E. Merrill Senior Fellow for Asia-Pacific Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Dr. Smith is one of the preeminent thought leaders in the United States-Japan relations and has always been exquisitely attuned to the role of local politics and subnational dynamics in the broader US-Japan relationship. She is in high demand. She's our favorite when it comes to such inspirational conversations. So without further ado, Sheila, the mic is yours.
Yuko, thank you so much. And thank you, Suzanne, for inviting me this morning. I am overwhelmed at this room. It is just makes my heart go pitter-patter. I am Sheila Smith, as I was so generously introduced, and I have the privilege this morning of introducing you, or at least having a conversation myself, with two of our most distinguished local leaders in the United States. All the way to my left, of course, you will recognize the Governor David Ige of the great state of Hawaii.
Aloha.
I understand the delegations for both of these gentlemen are in the room, so please don't hesitate to show your love. And on my right here is the distinguished mayor of the city of Houston, Texas, Sylvester Turner. Mayor Turner. There we go. I know many of you don't actually know me and the work that I do at the Council on Foreign Relations, but I was educated at Columbia University to study Japanese domestic politics and Japan's foreign policy. And I think many of us think that that subject matter means that we look only to national governments, the diplomats, the distinguished diplomats like Mr. Shikata, who manage the partnership between the United States and Japan. But as I began my career doing research, it became very clear to me that it's not just the folks who make policy, but the citizens that must respond to those decisions in our national capitals are very, very important to understand. The dynamics within our societies are so critical to what we do, not only as nations, but in the US-Japan partnership. So I thought I would start off today on this theme of reconnecting. I want to say to the US-Japan Council, by the way, The Great Reconnect was such a fabulous title. And unlike our ambassador, I am delighted that we are all reconnecting. I know that was a joke, but he's been active this week. So I'd like to begin with you, Governor Ige, if you can help our audience understand the work that you do and how you connect the people of Hawaii and Japan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As many of you know, our visitor industry is the #1 industry in Hawaii. For the first time, we are actually exceeding $100 billion. Our gross state product is $100 billion. And the visitor industry represents about 18 billion of that. And the most important source of travelers to the islands is, from the international perspective, is Japan. So 1.5 million visitors came from Japan to Hawaii, and they are the most important source of visitors We are very focused on our marketing. We try and get them to get married in the islands. We try and get them to bring their families back. And then we continue to hope that they continue to return to the islands. I think the other aspect that is really important to understand is that the Japanese visitors are very respectful. They're the visitors that we are trying to attract. They respect our native Hawaiian culture and traditions. They embrace, there are more hula dancers in Japan than they are in the state of Hawaii. There are more ukulele players in Japan than they are in the state of Hawaii. And, it is wonderful to see how serious the Japanese are whenever they undertake anything. They want to learn from the best. So our best kumu hulas teachers are coming to Japan to be able to teach hula. Our musicians are thriving here in Japan. And so I do understand that the Hawaii-Japan relationship is really very, very important to the state of Hawaii.
Excellent. And I want to also note, if you don't know already, that Governor Ige is the first of Okinawan ancestry to be elected as governor in the United States. Thank you. And I believe you will be heading to Okinawa to attend the Kenmin Taikai.
Yes, we'll be heading over to Okinawa after of spending a few days here in Tokyo.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor Turner, your city, the great city of Houston, is an energy capital, but it's so much more than that, and your connection to Japan is very vast. I understand that there is a ballet corps in town at the moment. Could you help us understand how you and the people from Houston are reconnecting with Japan?
Yes, and take me with you to Okinawa when you go. Look, let me just say that the relationship between Japan and the city of Houston go way back. Chiba City is our sister city for the last 50 years. In fact, one of the reasons why we're here is that this week is that 50th year. 5 years ago, the Houston Ballet brought a small subset of the ballet company to celebrate the 45th anniversary. This year, the Houston Ballet and their trustees brought a much larger company, and they will be performing tomorrow, Saturday, Swan Lake. And so that total company represents, there are probably about 130. Mm-hmm. Then at the same time, Japan happens to be the city of Houston's fourth largest trading partner, now about 12 billion and growing. ANA, the airline, in 2015 started its direct flight. Many of the companies that are principally located here in Japan have expanded to the city of Houston, so that there's a growing connection. Chiba City, for example, has a major port. The city of Houston has the #1 port in the United States, so there's some symmetry there. And we are looking at designing and constructing a high-speed train from Dallas to Houston to Dallas, using Japanese technology. So for the last 2 years, we have been trying to come to Japan. We finally made it. And so in addition to the Houston Ballet, there's the trade mission with the Greater Houston Partnership, focusing on how we strengthen those economic and energy ties with Japan. And there are about 35 of us. So totally in this week alone in Japan, there are about 150 Houstonians who are here.
There we go.
Who are here to demonstrate just how much we value the relationship and how we want to build on that relationship with Houston.
Well, I will be watching you and clapping on the high-speed rail side of things. We on the East Coast are dying for Japanese technology to come and help us out. I'd like to focus on one aspect of your leadership, both at the governor's level, at the state level, the mayor's level, city level, and that is executive decision-making. You are poised to deal with problems, and you have many of them. When we were talking in the green room, you both told me how many disasters you have covered in your 7 years or so in office. incredible number. But you have problems to solve quickly, but you also have the flexibility to deal with issues. So I want to talk a little bit about your role as a problem solver and how that might tie into local politicians, people that you interact with here in Japan, to exchange ideas, best practices. Governor Ige, would you like to help us understand that?
You know, at the National Governors Association, when I get together with other governors, we often say that serving as governor is the best job on the planet, bar none. And I do think that a large portion of that is because we can impact the lives of our citizens every single day. We don't require legislation to actually be able to help people and solve problems. So we like to refer to states as the laboratories of democracy, the whole notion that the best ideas start at the cities and states, and hopefully the best practices can be adopted and expanded to cities and states who, you know, the remarkable thing that I see every day is how similar the challenges that states face, regardless of whether it's Hawaii or Washington State or New York State. A lot of the challenges are the same. The solutions are a little bit different. Governors are problem solvers because we have to be. We impact our citizens every day.
Excellent. Mayor Turner.
Well, let me just say, when the mayors get together, we say we have the best job. And the reason is, with regards to mayors, we are the boots on the ground. We are the boats in the water. Everything flows downhill. So for mayors, we are on the front line. It doesn't matter what the politics is. When there are streets that need to be paved, it's not a Democratic street or a Republican street, it's a street. When it rains and it floods, the rain doesn't look for one part of town, so to speak, based on one's demographics. We have to address flooding. Those things that we cannot prevent, we have to manage. And we have to get the job done. We just can't postpone it. You mentioned disasters. In the last 7 years, I've been mayor now, the end of this year, 7 years, we have faced 7 federally declared disasters. And so we are the energy capital of the world, but the question is, how do we move forward and address climate change, because it's real? And so as a result of that, working with the energy sector, the business community, being the energy capital of the world, we had to come up with our Resilient Houston plan, which we did in 2020, our climate action plan, working with the energy sector, because it's important to recognize that if you don't make the necessary adjustments, you will face the same situation over and over again, and it'll cost you even more. So mayors, we can't ignore the problem. If it's a pension problem, we have to fix it. If it's a street problem, we have to fix it. And if it's dealing with climate change mitigation and adaptation or energy abundance, we have to address it.
So I want to stay on the climate change topic, if you don't mind, because both of you are very active leaders. You are the head of the Climate Mayors, Mayor Turner, I believe, and your leadership, Governor Ige, and the U.S. Climate Alliance has also been distinguished. We are in the midst of recognizing, and I think Governor Koike said this quite well, the time is now. We must act now on climate change. And at the same time, we're not quite where we need to be in terms of an energy transition, which you mentioned, Mayor Turner. So how do you balance this? How do you, as you think about our efforts to address climate change, first of all, share with us, you mentioned a couple of initiatives, and I'll start with you, Mayor Turner, if you don't mind. Help us understand how you balance this with the transition to more sustainable city, more energy resilience.
Well, I think the goal of cities and states is to build stronger, sustainable, resilient communities. The reality is that Mother Nature is going to take its course. But at the same time, we are contributing to those problems. And so being the mayor of the energy capital of the world, one would wonder, You know, how can the mayor of the energy capital of the world, of the world, be head of the United States climate mayors?
Yes.
The two just don't quite go together. But the reality is that they do. If you want to continue to be the energy capital of the world, you also now have to lead in energy transition, which means you have to focus on renewables. City of Houston, for example, as of July of 2020, we purchased more renewables than any other city in the United States. All of our municipal buildings are 100% powered by renewables. Now we're focusing and working with our energy companies, and we have some of the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the city of Houston. Now we are focused on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We're focused on clean hydrogen. We're focusing on taking a landfill in a low-income community and turning that into the largest urban solar landfill in the United States. So we have to make the adjustments. And we recognize, being Houston, energy capital of the world, that to the extent we can effectively transition in the energy transition sphere, then what we do in Houston can literally have an impact all across the globe. And consequently, we are focusing on clean tech, climate tech. We're working with our universities, and we recognize that even in this sphere, we have to have energy abundance, but we also have to be morally responsible and recognizing that if we don't make the change, Mother Nature will remind us that you failed to make the change. So we have to move forward, and we have to act with the greatest degree of urgency, even being the energy capital of the world.
Excellent, thank you. Governor Ige, you govern a state that is far, far away. Yeah. The islands out in the Pacific Ocean have their own challenges, I believe, in terms of energy stability. And also you address quite effectively the climate change challenge. Share with us how you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm proud that Hawaii was the first state in the country to set the goal of 100% of our electricity should be generated by renewable sources. We did that in 2015, and I still remember going to the next Governors Association, and other governors were coming to me saying, "You must be crazy. It doesn't make any sense." Clearly, since that time, 12 states have followed Hawaii's lead, recognizing that this climate crisis demands immediate and urgent action. I do think that has been one of the benefits of subnationals really being able to be bold and take action so that others can lead. Hawaii was the most dependent on fossil fuels 20 years ago. And we do see the impacts of climate change as an island community. Just talking to the mayor, he was mentioning that he had to deal with 7 federally declared emergency. I've had to deal with 40 federally declared emergency in my 8 years as governor. And we, as island community, see the impact of climate change more vividly and more urgently every single year. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done. We became the first state to embrace the goals of the Paris Agreement in law. And in 2018, we became the first state to recognize that net zero isn't good enough. It really is about net negative, and we are working to lead by example, having policies to get to net zero for our public schools and the universities, even our airports. And I think really being committed to protecting our environment and reforestation, recognizing that it's not good enough to stop at net zero. It really is about being able to support the natural environment and really remove greenhouse gases, more greenhouse gases than we emit.
Governor Ige, could I ask you also if you could share with us, and if you have conversations on these issues, perhaps with the governor of Okinawa, is there collaboration in terms of thinking about island communities and their particular challenges.
Yes.
Do you see that conversation as a effective one in the partnership?
Yes, absolutely. I do think as coming from island communities, we do realize that we all benefit from being more sustainable. I did execute bilateral agreements with Okinawa and Jeju in Korea and other island communities. I'm very active with the Pacific Island Conference of Leaders for our communities all around the Pacific, and really being focused on learning from each other and best practices, and recognizing that as island communities, we do see the impacts. We're the canaries in the coal mines of the past. We do see the impacts of climate change before any other communities. And we recognize the urgency about, this decade is the decade of action. We must be aggressive and bold and take those actions that will help benefit our communities. And as Mayor Turner has said, we recognize that it's not one or the other. Being a climate crisis advocate and taking action, we can help our economies by being focused on the economic opportunities that the transition will present. And really, we've seen our economies benefit from being a world leader in fighting climate change.
Excellent. Mayor Turner, I wanted to come back to you on this idea that these two have climate change and the energy transition have to be pursued in tandem. You've built some significant coalitions in Houston. Help us understand that building of that consensus among business, private sector, and public sector actors.
Unless you have all the stakeholders at the table, you're not going to achieve your climate action objectives. Everyone needs to be at the table. The energy sector needs to be at the table. The community, municipalities all need to be at the table. And then you move in the same direction. When we came up with our Resilient Houston Plan, for example, it was underwritten by BP. Our climate action plan was underwritten by our largest utility, CenterPoint, working to turn a landfill into the largest urban solar farm in the United States. That's underwritten and in tandem with the energy sector. The organizations, we talk about subnationals, for example, the United States climate mayors, those are 474 cities,
right.
Red cities and blue cities. In fact, we just had a meeting on Zoom this morning. I was on at 5 a.m. This morning. The Resilient Cities Network. Those are 90 cities from throughout the world, all moving in the same direction, which I'm the board chair. When it comes to the World Energy Cities Partnership, Kobe in Japan is a part of those 19 cities from around the world and focusing on hydrogen. So there are a number of organizations, both domestically in the United States and globally, recognizing that we have to form the consensus, work together, and it's important for all the stakeholders to be at the table. And it's not just from an environmental point of view, it's from an economic point of view. The trade mission, since we have been in Japan, in almost every conversation with corporate executives from Japan, decarbonization has come up, okay? Being innovative, how to address greenhouse gas emissions, and how to do it in such a way that economically it makes sense, and at the same time, we are providing energy abundance, but we are doing it in a very responsible way. And when there are so many world events and people are trying to weaponize energy, then I think it's imprudent on everyone's part, for example, to address climate, to do it in a resilient way, and to build stronger and more sustainable communities. And so I think that's where the focus is, and quite frankly, it just makes sound economic sense to do it.
So None of us are in your shoes, and I know this maybe, I don't mean this as a controversial question, but just as a slightly naive question about how municipalities and states work together. You are a governor of a state, you are a mayor of a city. How much buy-in do you need from your governor if you are, we were talking about Texas, and how much buy-in, Governor Ige, do you need from your municipal leaders to make your vision, to realize your vision? Can you do this at the level of governance that you, where you sit, or do you also reach out and across your communities? Governor Ige, could you help us understand that?
Sure. I guess I'm fortunate in the sense that I don't have as many counties as there are in Texas. And so I regularly meet with all the mayors in Hawaii, especially during this COVID pandemic. I really believe that from the people's perspective, they don't think of the federal government and the state government and the county government. They just see government. And I thought it was very important. And so for 2 times a week for the past 3 years, I have convened meetings with all the mayors in Hawaii to talk about the challenges before us. And that really has facilitated ongoing discussions with all the mayors. It's very important, as Mayor Turner had talked about, you are trying to build coalitions that we want to work with all stakeholders, even those who might have a different perspective, because in order to be successful, all voices have to be heard. Last month, we closed the last coal plant in the state of Hawaii, and I formed the Powering Past Coal Task Force, and it included environmentalists and the utilities, the developers of renewable energy projects, and we successfully closed the coal plant. But there's a lot of work in the transition, looking for clean renewable sources, developers to invest in those replacements. All of that is important so that our community doesn't suffer during these energy transformations. And getting all stakeholders at the table is the best way to find the best solutions.
Mayor Turner, help us understand the landscape that you're navigating in terms of these goals, not only within Texas, but in that 474 municipal city coalition that you've helped build.
Well, prayer always helps. In order to get, and I agree with the governor, in order to get the maximum result, the maximum return in a timely fashion that benefits the greatest number of people and businesses, it is important for example, the federal government, the state government, and local government to be aligned. That's what you want. It works best when all parties are aligned. I think as local leaders, we don't have the option of saying, well, may not disagree, or we don't have that sort of relationship on the state level or the federal level, so we're not going to do anything, we're focused on something else. You have to work through it and around it. Otherwise, the people that we serve, the people who need our assistance, they are the ones that are disadvantaged. And then sometimes you just have to, you may use different words, but the actions are still the same. In Texas, for example, we are the #1 state in terms of wind capacity. Well, that benefits everybody. We are the #2 state in terms of solar capacity. So that benefits everyone. And then at the same time, you can be moving in the same direction, even though it doesn't appear that you're sitting at the table together, if that makes any sense. But you have to find a way to work through it. My daddy said something to us when we were growing up, and that is, he said, son, you can spend all your time trying to plow up this stump, and you'll never make any headway. He said, the key is, even if there's a stump in your way, if you plow around the stump and then grow the seeds, then the crop will grow and you won't even see the stump. And I've applied that, and that is even when you don't have all the cooperation the support you may want, you still have to find a way to navigate around it with the hopes that eventually we'll all be on the same page. So in Houston, for example, I cannot say enough for the collaboration and support that we received from the business community on this trip. You know, you have city leaders traveling with the Greater Houston Partnership, representing the Greatest Chamber in the city of Houston, and then you have other leaders. And so you move in the same direction, and the hope is even on this particular day, for example, everyone may not be on the same page. Tomorrow may be different. So you have to keep the doors of communication open. You have to keep working with the governors, with the governor and federal leaders, and then you move forward. And I think that's the way to approach it. And we would not be able to do what we are doing in the city of Houston without policies, even coming from the state and the federal level, if they were really preventing us from moving forward. Now, we certainly want to build on and maximize those relationships, and I agree with everything that the governor had to say. When you're doing that, then everyone wins, and you got to find win-wins and not win-losses.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing, Sheila. You know, we had talked earlier that mayors and governors are really doers and problem solvers because we have to be. And we've aligned, and we find most often that we have lots of agreement. You know, we need to get things done, so we find agreement rather than focus on disagreement. And I do think that that's one of the things that are very different for subnationals, mayors and governors, is that we know that we could get fixated on disagreements, but that doesn't help us get our job done. You know, our job is to find agreement so we can move forward.
And even where there's disagreement politically, sometimes you got to find those stakeholders who can go and speak for you and work for you. Right. So sometimes it doesn't have to be. You can't make things personal. Okay. So you may not be the best person sitting at the table, but you may know someone else who can sit at the table and have that conversation and get that result. And if that's the case, it doesn't matter who gets the credit, as long as the work gets done.
I have to say this because I'm a parent, and so you forgive me for saying the personal side. I wonder if your father understands that the metaphor of the stone is now being used to solve climate change in Houston. That's terrific. The last piece I would like to really have a chat with both of you about, of course, is our future, and the future of the U.S.-Japan partnership, the future of both of our nations, and that is our next generation, our youth. I am privileged to wear the hat as the chair of the U.S. panel of KOLCON, which is a commission that advises the U.S. and Japanese governments on cultural and educational exchange. And we feel very strongly about making sure that we do our job to help and make sure that there's young people are continuing to play a vibrant role in the relationship, but also that they emerge as the future leaders of our partnership. I wonder if I could start with you, Governor Ige, and let us understand a little bit about how you see the next generation, building that next generation, especially in the U.S.-Japan space.
Sure, thank you. And actually, the First Lady is here, and she really has been a champion for international student exchange. You know, we recognize that it's very important to engage the next generation, and probably the best avenue for that is going to the students. And we recognize that we live in a global world today, and students will be better able to adapt and be successful the more global their perspectives. And so we are working to engage as part of our sister state prefecture arrangements. You know, we have 6 prefectures in Japan that are sisters to the state of Hawaii. And we are working with all of them to expand student exchanges, opportunities for students from Japan to visit and experience Hawaii, and opportunities for students in Hawaii to visit Japan. And you know, we do see lots of benefits to both communities. And that is just one focus of us in terms of ensuring that the next generation can participate. You know, I am going to Okinawa on Saturday for the Taikai, and my children will be joining us so that they have the opportunity. You know, for many of us in Hawaii, it's more than business. It really is about family. You know, I do have family members in Okinawa today, and the opportunity would be to have my children meet them. On my last trip, when I signed the sister state agreement with Yamaguchi Prefecture, I was able to visit Suoshima, which is the hometown of my mother's grandparents, and actually got to meet a relative that I was not aware of, continues to live here in Japan. So it is about ensuring that the next generation understands. You know, as the ambassador had mentioned, the US-Japan relationship is the most important bilateral relationship for the world, for the Indo-Pacific region and the rule of law and democracy on the planet. And I do feel like Hawaii has a very important role to play in that US-Japan relationship. And it's very important that we engage the next generation.
Let me pause for a second and welcome the First Lady of the state of Hawaii, Mrs. Ige. Thank you. Mayor Turner, how do we think in Houston about cultivating that next generation of youth to be globally engaged and help contribute to solving these problems that you are working on?
One of the most important aspects of the Chiba City, sister city relationship with the City of Houston is the Youth Ambassadors Program. That cultural exchange with Houstonians coming to Japan, to Chiba City, and then with students from Chiba City coming to the City of Houston. And they've been doing that now for well over 40 years. Now that we're kind of working our way through COVID, hopefully those youth ambassador programs can continue. But that's very important. The second is, for example, the Houston Ballet is in town. Yeah. When you take a look at that company, they are very young. You know, we were with them last night in a reception. Mm-hmm. They are youthful, they're energetic. They wanted their mayor to dance with them.
Did you take a picture?
We did take a picture, you know, but they are youthful, and for some of them, this was their first time to Japan. Right. They were excited,
right,
and they will remember. They'll go back to Houston. They'll talk about it, and they will want to return. My daughter was talking to her about being here in Japan. One of the things she said to me, "Dad, why didn't you bring me?" So we'll have to go. You'll have to come back. And so we do that. I'm very optimistic about the future. With the U.S.-Japan Council, I'm looking out at this audience. Maybe one day soon, there will be like a junior wing of the U.S.-Japan Council, so that when we're looking out, this room will be full of students, young folk from Japan and from the United States. Someone once wrote, and I've never forgotten, that students are messages that we send into the future to a world we ourselves may never see. What kind of message shall we send? So it's important for these cultural exchanges to take place. It means a great deal. And shouldn't have to wait, for example, until you get my age to come. This is my first time to Japan.
Is it really?
Wow.
It's my first time.
Welcome.
But I'm the mayor of the City of Houston. And quite frankly, you shouldn't have to be the mayor of the City of Houston or some key executive to be in Japan, visiting Japan. I think that robs our kids of a lot that's needed in order to build a better world. So we have to get them meeting. We have to get them in these exchanges much sooner. Otherwise, their perspective is based on their frame of reference and what they have been exposed to. And I think one of the reasons why we're having so many worldwide problems is because people have not had a worldwide experience.
Right.
And it's easy to dislike people or things you do not know. It's very difficult to dislike and work against a friend. So we need to establish more of a friendship relationship. And I think we'll build not only better countries between Japan and the United States, but quite frankly, I think we'll build a better world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a mission that's very close to my heart, so I'm encouraged by both of you. We often, in the U.S.-Japan partnership, understand that there's such enthusiasm, just as in this audience here, for the partnership, and the people who manage it and define it, in fact, are not always the government leaders, but they're people like you, who have friends and colleagues and family. My story is a simple one. My father served in the U.S. Navy. And so that was the spark. That was my first exposure to Japan. My son is 22, and I bring him obviously kicking and screaming sometimes on business trips. But he just came back from college, and he's like, "Why are you in Japan without me?" I said, it's okay, sweetie, you can come. The door is open. Thank you, Mr. Shikata. So he's arriving on Saturday. I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm not going to ask. But that little spark, you know, it's that exposure, it's that friendship, it's that connection that you make that makes the difference in the future lives of all of our young people. And it's so important that we provide the opportunity for as many young people in the United States and as many young people in Japan to get to know each other.
Yes.
And to share their thoughts and their dance and all kinds of energy that we have in that next generation. But I will just say that it takes all of us in this room to make that happen. It doesn't happen by itself.
And you know, Sheila, Donna and I have visited with many students in Japan and many students in Hawaii. And you know, a teenager is a teenager, whether they're in Hiroshima or whether they're in Honolulu. And it's remarkable how they get connected and they click and they relate so easily.
Right.
You know, as the mayor had mentioned, it really is our responsibility to make sure that as many of the students as possible have that opportunity to engage. And you know, one of the benefits of COVID is we all know how to Zoom and team and do all of those kinds of things. So it's possible to engage our students in a real way. Hopefully they get the opportunity to travel and visit and experience. And they have the opportunity to see how we have more in common as a peoples all around the world than we disagree with for the most part.
And you know, one of the events that we have every year, and it's in other cities as well, Anime Missouri.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
let me tell you, I was exposed to Anime Missouri when I became mayor. And they brought this costume for me to put on. I didn't know what the heck it was. But all the young folk knew what it was. And when I went over to the convention center, they were there by the thousands.
Yes.
I mean, by the thousands. And just this past summer, there were close to 50 to 60,000 people that attended that. And it's just growing and growing. And it's exposing people to Japanese culture. And I saw people there from all walks of life. And I agree with the governor. In many ways, if we get out of young people's way, they know diplomacy.
Yeah.
They know how to work things out. They know how to get past, you know, whatever, if we get out of their way. So, but it's those type of events that really make a difference. And then in the meantime, you know, I'm very appreciative to people from the city of Houston that I've had the privilege of learning. Glenn Gundo is back there, Donna Cole, and others who are back there from the city of Houston. You just have to take advantage of folk who are in your city, in your communities, and learn from them. But it is important that we expose that younger generation to as much as possible.
So as we wrap up, we're running a little bit towards the end of our time. Both of you are coming to the end of your tenure. Governor Ige, I believe, is December is going
December
to be
5th.
the
yes.
transition for you. And Mayor Turner, you've got maybe a year, or next year is your transition, or?
Unless they write me in.
Well, we're going to be working on that. But I wonder, we won't have the privilege of hearing from you in your capacity, your current capacities. Hopefully, you'll both remain engaged with the U.S.-Japan Council and the U.S.-Japan Partnership even after you're no longer in office. But I wonder if you would just share with us, there's so many people in this room who are dedicated to the U.S.-Japan Partnership in private sector, civil society, government, across the board. Do you have any words of advice for us in terms of the kind of work we might do in the U.S.-Japan Partnership that you think would be valuable? Governor
I
Schmidt.
do think that, oftentimes you don't realize the role that all of you play. The mayor and I, we have responsibilities and we do things, but it really is NGOs and other non-government entities that play such an important part. In the state of Hawaii, our sister state relationships are really strengthened by NGOs that continue to work. We have a committee on the Hawaii-Hokkaido relationship and the Hawaii-Hiroshima relationships, and they're looking for business partners and education partners and a lot of the people-to-people kinds of activities that make these relationships work. They're all driven by many of you who participate. So I just want you to know, as a governor, that I truly appreciate what you do, and what you do is so important because it makes what we do successful, because we can't do it alone. So I would just say that what you do and what the U.S.-Japan Council does is so important for that people-to-people connection that helps us be successful.
Thank you, Governor. Mayor Turner.
And I couldn't say it any better, Governor. It's like the great reconnect.
Yes.
It's important for people to come together. U.S.-Japan Council has just done an incredible job, and you want to build on it. The governor and I, we have titles to our name, but the reality is, without people in this room, people who are not in this room, there's not very much that we can do. We are representative of the people that we serve. And I don't say that voted for us, because whether they vote for us or not, we represent them. But the civic leaders, those who are in charge of organizations or participating, the business leaders, all the stakeholders, they really are the ones that drive this. I would only say, and you probably already know, just recognize your value and the benefits of this relationship. Recognize the value of it. And there's no more important time than for those relationships to be strengthened than right now. And quite frankly, the world won't be saved by the governor or by the mayors. This world will be saved and made better by people like yourselves. And if you continue to do and build even more, then we'll turn over a better world to our children and to their children. So thank you for taking the time to come together, reconnect, having the dialogue, having the discussion, and don't dare think that your time is in vain.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great privilege to join you this morning. Join me in thanking Governor Ige and Mayor Turner.